Hello and welcome back to Builders, the podcast where we dive into the minds of the people shaping the future of technology and business. I'm your host, Lee Haynes, and today I'm joined by Florian Westerdahl, Global Head of IT at Vitrolife Group. Florian has a wealth of experience at the intersection of technology, healthcare, and business leadership, garnered throughout job posts at companies such as Lindex, Agnitum, and Unisys. Florian, warm welcome to Builders. How's it going?
Thank you. It's going great. So I've been looking forward to this conversation all day.
Lovely to have you here. Let's dive straight in, shall we? To start, could you share a bit about your career path, your background, and how you ended up as a global head of IT at Vitrolife?
Yeah, sure. So I come from engineering. I've been working a lot with databases. Yeah, data has been the foundation all through. And you could say I've come from different seats around the table. So I've been on the vendor seat, been on the outsourcing side, trying to solve businesses' challenges from that direction. So, and also been on a consultancy seat, offering advice and consulting hours from that perspective. And then, of course, I've been on the brand seat, for example, like ordering these kind of services. I've seen perspectives from all sides around the typical IT services solutions. So that's a little bit of background. So I've done data, I've done consulting, then I stayed for 16 years within fashion retail because it's quite an interesting business. So I stayed there in IT leadership position for 16 years. And retail, is fierce, competitive. The marginals are slim,
Yeah.
So one day you have a wealth of opportunities, and the next day you're really weighing your options. You have to be super lean and super slim. So that kind of shifting landscape is I can see how people find it tough to work under these conditions, but I find it interesting, stimulating, and fun because these kind of constant crisis offers you the urgency. You need that tool of urgency in order to make changes that would be otherwise quite hard to make. So I find that kind of business make forces the company to stay lean, forces the company to reinvent itself, to transform and not become, lazy. So I find it really stimulating, and I also it's the same for the competitors in the industry mostly. So it's a fair game. I learned a lot from retail, and also I think their obsession about the customer and that perspective had also been very, very educational for me. Never ever again coming from the technology side in any position, in any question ever more. That's the last thing on the agenda all the time.
Yeah.
So I think it was a really, really good learning experience. And now I in February I shifted industry and worked and went to life science in MedTech. So that's Vitrolife Group. And that's a whole other game. So now I'm learning again, and I'm thinking maybe I'm getting older, so the learning experience is tougher, but it's also more interesting because we walk in with much more perspective, much more experience.
Yeah.
And I reflected on that. I really think it's important to not recruit within your industry all the time. And I know I've done the same, and I'm sure my current employer usually does the same as well. So I'm a little bit of an outlier, perhaps, on purpose, I expect. And it's super valuable because as I'm learning a lot of what this industry is really good at, I can also see how the incoming challenges in this industry really benefits from lessons learned maybe 5-10 years ago in retail.
Yep.
So yeah, please recruit outside your industry. That's my reflection.
A fantastic bit of early advice there. I could agree, and kudos for sticking it out so many years in the retail industry. That fast pace is not for everyone. But on to Vitrolife Group. Vitrolife's a global leader, right, in fertility treatment technologies. They have these kind of integrated solutions across IVF, cryopreservation, genetic testing, right? So it's helping people fulfill the dream of having a baby, essentially, right? This is an incredibly human mission. I'm just interested, like, what was most compelling to you about joining a company in this space? Did the nature of Vitrolife's mission shape your kind of decision here, or?
So already, I was already looking for something else to do, and I was thinking, like, what would happen if I switched the industry and I worked another 16 years in one place? Well, that would be my last assignment, basically, before pension. So I was really considering where do I want to spend my potentially last assignment if I stay that long? Let's see. But I mean, it could be. So then, I mean, I never come from that perspective before, I guess, with age and everything like that. How do I spend my life? These kind of a little bit more heavy questions come in. And when I was approached by Vitrolife, I didn't even know who they were, because I've been fortunate enough not to need these services. So for me, they were completely unknown. Actually, I sat in my car listening to ChatGPT and just asking 100 questions about the company. And when I realized what they were doing and the mission they had, of course, okay, this might be it, because. For me, finding a job within retail, I guess that's very, very doable. In other industries, I find it harder, at least for me. I find it harder. I become a little bit of a retail profile. So the opportunity to switch industry and to do something that is really valuable for a lot of people, and I think it's going to be one of these big new discussions the coming 10 years. I think it's already starting. With the population pyramids and where we're heading and how unsustainable the current birth rates are in the world. So I think this is going to be a really, really big thing. And to be able to join with the, without question, strongest brand in the IVF space, that's a privilege and opportunity. So I'm back in the school bench learning again, and I love it.
Okay, I can quite imagine. To talk a little bit about challenges in digital decision making. I believe you've said that, like, boards and the leadership teams, you've obviously been in leadership roles yourself, especially in certain industries or sectors, they can pose a greater threat to companies than AI or other external factors. Could you elaborate on that point? How can these kind of boards and leadership teams pose a greater threat than these kind of external factors? A lot of companies don't think in these terms, do they?
No, actually, I was quoted at Lindex. I was quoted back to me by people. So I think it starts to resonate in people, this message that I was asked to talk about what risks in general we have. And I found that when I looked around, the main risk were the decision making internally was absolutely crucial. And I find that so much of the world today have a big digital part. There is so many aspects to this question. So let's start from another direction. So everything. We are in very changing world, and it's, if you look a bit forward, I don't expect that to slow down. No. So we have disruption, global politics, supply chains, of course, new technologies like machine learning, AI, these kind of things. So we have a lot of disrupting things going on in a pace that we haven't really seen, at least not during my lifetime. So. Then I guess for companies, the way we are structured, the way we are thinking, everything from how we're thinking about financing initiatives to decision-making, business cases, everything is really structured and built up on principles for another world, in my mind, where you optimize for resilience, security, predictability, stability. These are the foundation things that you optimize for. And I think like that's one of the big shifts, that the primary thing you should optimize for now is adaptability. So that doesn't mean that we sacrifice security and everything else. It means that the way we solve security, the way we solve stability, predictability, is no longer allowed to be done in a way that lowers our adaptability. So I think like that is one big shift. Another big shift that I don't really hear people talk about that much either is like technology has changed so much. So all the old principles that are very grown into the mindset of maybe non-digital leaders is like, well, it's really important to consolidate. It's really important that we don't have a wealth of different systems and solutions, and you focus a lot of like, what systems do we have? And that was important 10, 15 years ago. It's still interesting to have fewer systems as a general principle, but the weight of this is much, much, much lower, especially because what we're talking about how can we adapt and be flexible? How can we create the capabilities we need in order to execute our strategy? Well, of course, we should consume the opportunities, the services we need for this. And the volume shouldn't matter. The consolidation shouldn't matter. These things should be solved in a different way. It's also a good example on how to think differently, right? So I think like these two shifts, and there are all the other shifts as well, and the way that we need to optimize for something else makes a lot of the principles false in how to govern your organization, and especially how to develop and mature your organization. So I think like so the main point, in order to finally answer your question a little bit, I think like the main challenge is that no matter where you sit around a management, if you're on marketing or your sales or wherever you sit in the executive room, your share is to a higher degree technology and digital all the time. And if you don't understand the real principles for that, and you don't understand what you optimize for, and you don't have a grasp of your processes, what data is, data objects, if you don't understand the basics on how the systems that are going to serve your processes can integrate, and you need to understand these things in order to build your organization even. So in order to design your organization, no matter if it's business or IT, you need to understand these fundamentals, or have somebody around the table who can do that. And I see the CDOs, CEOs I find that they're spending all their time just compensating for the lack of digital knowledge. And maybe somebody would say, well, that's their purpose. Well, that's all that they are doing, and you can only do so much. So I think a company needs to bring in digital on the executive level, and absolutely on the board level. So I think the most devastating decisions I've seen has always come with the best intentions from board and on old principles or thinking, and the consequences can be massive.
I think it's a really good point, because on a board level, there are different surveys, but one from PwC that I was reading recently said that like less than a quarter, so only like 23% of CEOs said that their board had sufficient understanding of emerging technologies to effectively govern these digital transformations. I mean, this is quite significant, right? Because like, decisions might be made with the best intentions, but without a lack of understanding, they can have these significant kind of impact, right, down the line. I mean, have you seen this kind of knowledge gap yourself throughout your experience, and rather, how would you say it kind of creates in practice? How does it create this kind of real risk or missed opportunities in these companies?
Well, I guess I guess the way, especially under pressure, the way you decide, for example, how to size your organization for a particular period. So I think like to understand that an organization is, for example, not just a head count. So if you divide an organization maybe in 3 parts, if you say that now when you do things like this, it's never going to be fully true, but just as a principle discussion, right? So you can decide it in three types of FTEs. You can the people who create work. So that would be managers and product owners, these kind of people, right, who have ideas. And I mean, that's wonderful. And then we have the people who do the work. And then we have the people who are actively optimizing our processes and removing work, right? So there should be some sense of these 3 concepts and some sense of the balance between these. So, I mean, there are excellent research on this area. You can read on going transformation, what kind of amount of your total number of staff should actually be involved should be spent on improving your processes, for example. So there are good benchmarks on this. And I find like maybe sometimes the management companies like the one you mentioned, sometimes they answer the wrong question. So they were, okay, do we have the right spend on IT or whatever? These kind of these benchmarks, you can use them in presentations and stuff like that, but they are never really true because it depends so much on how your strategy looks and how you're sourcing everything, how you are executing your company. So I mean, this figure become kind of like falsehoods because they're not that clever. So I think that you should really approach what are my ratios here and what am I trying to accomplish? Am I doing a big digital transformation? What is my objective of that? And what I need in order to accomplish that, right? Yeah. So I think like being more nuanced in these things and more understanding. I think was another fundamental thing. There are sometimes I get the impression that very simplified. Sometimes you can think like if we just add more people, so I can
throw people at the problem.
Yeah, and sometimes I mean many teams, especially in digital and tech. I mean, if you increase the number of people, you will notice a significant slowdown immediately.
Yeah.
And you might even not get back to your original because it's for a number of reasons. So I think like this simplicity, a very simple way of thinking about these things needs to go away. And I think like many organizations might be sitting with what, I don't know if that's the official term, but sitting with an organically grown organization, where it's grown over time, depending on a manager in a certain area or the history or a former acquisition or whatever that just shaping the organization. And if you're taking everything else in your company and your strategy seriously, you actually have to sit down and design an organization, not to maintain status quo, but actually to execute your strategy, right?
Yeah.
So it needs to be designed. And if you do that, it would be pointless to do that without designing your architecture at the same time. Basic Conway's law, that else your old architecture will hang like a shadow, and you will wonder why your perfectly designed organization doesn't work, right? So that information and people are super connected, and it doesn't matter what you do in either place, you need to do it across, right? So this means that the essential message is that IT cannot ever, at least not in a bigger company, be on the side. It needs to be both very strong digital players in the business side, but also very, very tightly coupled in all strategic work, in all decision making, because these things have real consequences on how we do things, right?
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that kind of technical kind of competence on the business side and very, very shortly. But just, I want to get your take as well on these digital transformations. I mean, this large majority nowadays are obviously AI related in some way or some form, right? And to kind of quote, to get, introduce some more kind of public data here, a significant number, I think, depending where you look, but up to 95% of AI projects, it is said, have not generated any return on investment for companies. So in your opinion, what are these companies doing wrong, or what can they learn from the 5% that are seeing value?
I think what they first should do is read that report you're referencing, which is McKinsey report, I think from June or July.
Yeah.
So I think it was like 300 initiatives, and I think they also were run by McKinsey themselves. So that's interesting. Anyways, AI is something different. So I don't want to say that, okay, we got these technologies, then we got another technology, which is AI. AI is something else. We've seen it before in machine learning, of course, which is most similar. But generative AI is not a new branch on the old technology tree. It's a new tree in the park. So you have two trees now, and it's a technology which is emergent. That means that we have not created this with a particular purpose, really.
Yeah.
We don't really. So we are created an artifact, actually, rather than a technology. And we are actually doing research on the own artifact we created to find out what we can do with it. So does that look like any other technology except for deep learning, machine learning? No, it doesn't. It's everything is backwards. So I would say that the absolute best thing you can do is really, the report is very simple, very straightforward, and I love the conclusions in that report. So please read the report. And I mean, I did tests. I did tests in retail before almost everybody else, together with excellent engineers in my network. So we did the RAG, to having Gen AI using corporate data to communicate, etc. So we did this test. And I think my most important message is all the findings we did in Q1 2023, I think, all the findings there, all the shortcomings are all still there. So we are training stronger and stronger models, but that curve is also flattening now. Yeah. At least that my reflection. I mean, it looked exponential between 3.5 GPT and 4. It looked, you could really see it. And then I said, okay, if it's going to go exponential, I mean, then just sit back and watch the world explode, because that's we cannot predict this anymore. But I found it like a relief that no, limits in physics and compute and everything else going to slow this down significantly. Probably. We never know. Probably. So now I would say, read the report, understand that this artifact is not like other technologies. You should not say, okay, you shouldn't worry that competition will just totally disrupt your business using Gen AI. And let's say they do. Why don't you copy them immediately, right? If that unlikely event would happen, right? So I would say, go back to your strategy, improve your processes, improve your data, and whatever happens out there, as long as the tool is not protected inside a competitor or something, but that would be weird, right?
Yeah.
You are probably better equipped to deal with that kind of situation at that point. So it made sense to do these kind of tests in 2023, maybe even in 2024. Now doing the same tests as other company does. Why? Read the report, understand where you actually have proven benefits like customer service, these kind of things, and understand that we now have an artifact which we can put in a particular place, in a particular process, and make a huge difference in this tiny place in that process. Just like we have other tools that can do the same in other places. And we have never had this tree in the garden before. It's a new tree.
Yeah, it's a really good way to put it about, the new tree, and it's growing. Yeah, it's in a significant growth phase still, right? But I think also, for me, part of the problem has been, previously at least, that organizations it's almost like buying this AI snake oil, I like to say, because by which I mean these kind of AI tools or platforms are have been overhyped or kind of considered for all organizations, when they should be kind of considered or used quite specifically for different types of organizations. So I think there's that kind of overhype or overpromise, and where companies try to maybe solve the wrong problems that are really kind of human or cultural or, strategic at their core,
They're starting at technology. That's the first fault. We never should start at technology. We should never start at the system ever in any discussion. So that's a fundamental. But also there is another special thing, I think, with the generative AI. I did my own pilot way too long. I spent too much time on that. Why did I do that? So when I reflect on my own mistakes and I look back, I find generative AI is so seductive. It's so close. You're so close to actually having an absolutely amazing solution, and then it reacts in a new way, unpredictable. Something changes, and then you're like back in a really swamp again. So you feel like we are almost there, right? But in reality, you aren't, because the technology will only bring you to this place where you actually need to be in this place, and that gap, that's the divide in my mind, at least. So it's a seductive technology.
Absolutely, you're constantly on the cusp of like euphoria, right? But just to be let down. But you were talking earlier about the technical competence on the business side and everything. I mean, you've highlighted the imbalance between business and IT competence, or misalignments, potential misalignments. Do you think it's easier for tech professionals to learn business, if we put it that way, rather than business leaders to learn tech?
So we are all individuals. So I guess in the end, it's up to the individual. But what I find is that, tech people, we have always worked cross businesses, processes, everything. So we are first of all, we are used to being forced to learn new, both in our own profession, but also, today I'm apparently working for marketing and trying to understand what they're doing here. And the next day you're working for logistics, trying to understand supply chain. So you're very used to that. Your whole career, you have been doing these kind of things, right? So that's one thing. Then I think also like technology and digital things, especially how to do digital well, is counterintuitive. We are not digital creatures. We are physical creatures. For us, we live in a waterfall. If I build you a chair, I will have to get all the specs right in my Excel, because I'm going to order this wood from China, and then I have spent my money. That's the world we live in. So we are completely hardwired for that. So when you bring in lean and agile, and you bring in digital and MVP and everything like that, if you don't sustain it, it will just collapse. So the essential material we work with is counterintuitive, right? So I find that it's usually harder to get a skilled business resource to get some significant level within technology understanding. Not at all impossible, but harder. It's a harder journey than it is for a tech person to really understand a certain business area. For example, I would say a senior tech person will absolutely thoroughly understand a particular area of a business within 1 to 3 months. That's not a whole business, of course, but a particular area where you want to specialize the work or a domain, right? So there is, and I think everybody can feel that imbalance, and it makes the conversation unbalanced and unfair. Where I guess from the business side, you might be tired of IT's lecturing and going on about the same things, these boring data and boring processes and stuff like that. Why can't you just put in the same system I had at my old work, which was so great, and shut up about it, right? And what they don't realize is that system doesn't matter at all. Why it was great was because in the old workplace, they had really good processes. They're perfectly integrated, and they had control of the data. And this is why you had a great experience. That's the real reason. So I think working on so we were, I think also IT maybe were forced to mature. Not all IT is mature, of course, right? But some of us were forced to mature earlier. and understand the big picture. So why I think business haven't been forced in the same way. So I think that's an unevenness, and we need to help each other, because this is what the game is about: cooperation and help. And I think, like, what is the most important thing you need to do in leadership with IT? You need to establish trust, that they have a reason to really, really trust you, because without that, you have to switch job, you have to work somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think at its core this kind of misalignment, when it's there, kind of stems more from culture? Is it structural or kind of leadership gaps?
So when it comes to doing things great digital, it's maturity is required. So what brings in maturity? Well, you need discipline. I'm sorry, you will have to do a lot of boring stuff before we can even do our fun stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like,
to lay the foundations, right?
Yeah. You have to, and that requires top-down leadership. And for that, top-down must think it's just as important as this, must understand how important it is. And for that, you need to present it in a way that it really clarifies how important this is. And for sure, this is a leadership question. And I find that it's we need to be at work, but that goes for everything. We need to be at work for the same reasons, everybody, right? Even if we all want the company to succeed, well, is that your main prio, or do you prioritize your career or other interests before that, or maybe politics within the company or whatever, right? So yeah. But these things are not IT related. They are everywhere, right? Yeah,
absolutely. So I mean, we're arguing for that. I mean, that companies need to hire more tech savvy people on the business side.
Oh yeah.
Are there just on this last one on this topic? Are there specific kinds of roles or profiles that would make the biggest difference here, do you think?
Yeah, I think a board should be half of the board should at least have a technical background, digital background in some sort, and same for the executive team. Without that, it's really, really, really hard, and especially if you're trying to govern from the top. If you don't delegate, you can if you have a strong foundation, you have good team, you can work with a more delegated organization, which is also more adaptable, more flexible, and to my personal liking, I prefer that, of course. But I think that you need to fix the top. The head needs to work.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important. When it comes to, I mean, you have different operating models for doing things digitally in a company. So there are variations to choose from, and depending on sourcing and how high turn responsibility you take. But I think owning, deciding who does what. So if business should own the processes, should really own and it needs to work with them, understand them. If the business, I think the business side, if you're going to have a business and IT side, I think they need to learn about the integrations. They need to learn about data. They need to understand the concepts of this, and they need to take ownership about this together with IT. But I think the final ownership should be on the business side for your processes and your digital products, everything like that. It really needs to own, and they should. And now we go back to the earlier question. I find that it's much more comfortable for organizations sometimes to think, okay, who in the business side can we move into these roles if they doing this kind of changes, taking more responsibility on this side. So then it's very easy to select somebody senior in the business or somebody with great experience and track record to do this. And to me, I thought this was the right path for many years as well, but my own conclusion, my personal reflection, it's not. It's better to bring in a digital experience person and have them learn that area.
Yeah.
So I rather see if you take a simple, not simple, but we think a function, a bit more generic function like HR, it makes more sense for HR to hire a experienced product owner or some digital product owner or similar competence to sort out the processes and data and do the groundwork. Because from then on, I mean, technologies today, we can do anything. We can do absolutely anything if that is put in place. Well, since we got the new tree in our garden, there is, in theory, nothing left that we can't automate almost, right? So that whole batch, about, I love generative AI, but I mean, it has its challenges. Yeah. So now my mind will start to wander immediately. So I think, yes, for sure, they need to bring in digital resources directly on the business side, and they need to put them in charge of the structures.
To also circle back to your point about adaptability, you mentioned it earlier as like the most valuable company trait today. I mean, this is adaptability as like a competitive edge, essentially, more important than security, reliability, all of these. I just want to kind of focus a little bit on adaptability. Why do you think it is so critical?
So I used to say that if you're number 2 in everything, you're number 1 in the world. So that's how I see it. So the next wave of COVID, how will you restructure in panic? How will you restructure to continue your business, right? I think COVID taught us a lot about prioritization. I think a lot of companies have to do some serious soul searching very quickly as well, and prioritize what is really important here and now. So I think if company looked back at what they did during that period and what was successful and what was less successful, they will find, for one thing, where they need more adaptability, and also they would find how much faster can we actually move when we don't focus on 100 things but actually 10 things. So I think like these are lessons from that scenario, and I think with all likeliness we will see more of these similar scenarios going forward. So I think all the decisions you couldn't make then, a lot of them depended on structural reasons, but also your basic IT architecture, and also the silent killer, the most deadliest thing of them all, the technical debt. That's sometimes so hard to visualize and explain when you try to explain it for everybody involved. And also make the cost of it transparent. It's also very, very hard. And it just kills company. You can have the best strategy, you can even have the best people, but if you accumulated too much of that debt, you might already be dead as a company, but you really don't do it. So you just enter a slow death because it's too much to fix, too much to pay off. And I think there's another point in this with flexibility. I'm not sure about this, but sometimes I get the impression that I think one way when executives decides what to down prioritize, they feel like, okay, if I'm making the wrong decision now, I'm ready to invest 3 times as much in 2 years and we're going to get this done. So that's not true. Things have lead times. So you cannot pay yourself out of technical debt, and you cannot pay yourself out of organization debt. The lead time of being fat in the wrong places, not being flexible in the right places, is just too much. So you need to create this now, while there is no COVID, while there is no thing, so you can adapt. So and organization and architecture, those are the minimum places where you need to think. And of course,
And I think it's a really good, you talk a bit about kind of how, what true adaptability might look like in companies' architecture and its organization. But how do you think you measure adaptability in practice, like in systems, in teams, even in culture? How can this be measured? Because I think, many companies might claim they're adaptable, but probably fall short in practice, right?
So that's a really, really good question. So this is one of the questions I don't think I have an answer on. If I would think about it for a few seconds, I would like... I think if we look at everything a company wants to do, and when it tries to change the prioritization, how successful it is or not is, I think every company at least have a sense of either massive frustration or that they are maybe okay, they are doing okay. So I think at least the executive level knows what they think needs to be done, and if it's being done or not, or if things just drag out. If very simple operations take extreme time, so for sure you might have issues with architecture, organization, and technical depth. And technical depth won't show. You're doing the same things as your competitors does. You have the same amount of teams. You have everything same, but they seem to mess everything up. And there is always some new find. And there's, it's like when you try to renovate an old house, you think you're going to change the floor, and in the end you changed half the house, right?
Yeah.
So and that's because one of the reasons is that you're underinvested in your platform, and you maybe not have enough maturity in how you do things. So I think that you've shown a lot of profit over many years. One of the reasons might be that you have underinvested, and now you stand unarmed in a digital war.
Standing at the edge of the cliff there. But are there particular red flags, for example, that you look for in architecture or in governments, in the organization, that suggest a company is maybe fragile rather than adaptable?
Yeah, I think like if there seems to be organically grown architecture that it's not planned, if there is no information modeling done, if there is unclear ownership, that is, that's I think like on your first 2-3 days, you will, with the right questions, just find out quite quickly. And also the representation of the digital side in the executive team is also, one of these key indicators on where you are in the scale, how tough this journey is going to be, right? So I think like that those would be typical things, very boring things, but they are important. And I think like also, I think another flag now when I think about it, that's if you listen when the business discuss, projects, and if they tend to talk about systems without mentioning any systems, but just naming system names, then and you're not at the end of the discussion, then there is a big problem, because they have nobody has really talked to them about, it's not about the systems at all. You need to talk about the strategy, you need to talk about capabilities you think will be needed, and you need to talk about these things. And the very, very last time, you would look at, okay, who can best, with our architecture, with our needs, with our setup, with the competence we have, who can best facilitate this? Because for anything you want, there is 100 solutions out there today.
Yep. You talk a little bit about, I wanted to kind of look ahead in terms of digital strategy, get some pieces of advice from you. And there are a couple of nuggets right there. But if you had to choose like one thing that leaders should stop doing immediately when it comes to digital strategy, what would it be?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but if I would pick one, I think one traditional reflex from leaders is to add control. And I can see the desire for it, but control doesn't solve the problem. Actually, there are better ways to expose the problems than adding control. So maybe you find like we need to add these layers of controls between the executives and everything that's going on in the company. We add these kind of frameworks, everything like that. And if the frameworks are optimized to service the executive team, then we have a problem. If they're not designed to service the people who actually do something there, who actually will provide this value for us, then we are actually hurting the situation even more. And there is other problems with adding control. It's like it is kind of difficult to explain, but if you start asking for things, first of all, people will of course work on that instead, building PowerPoints for you or Excels or whatever, right? But if you start asking for things, what you ask for will also be a message on what to optimize for.
Right.
So you're implicitly delivering new instructions and new KPIs by just asking questions. So it's super important for leaders to really be clever about what questions you put to your teams, right? I think that reflects that control will save you. No, control might hurt you even more. Or no, it will for sure hurt you even more.
Yep. And what's one mindset shift that you think the next generation of digital leaders, what's this kind of one mindset shift that they must embrace, and why?
I think like there is also a lot of things to choose between, but I think like what I've been messaging a little bit here is like, but I haven't really stated very clearly. It's like a people first mindset. So if you don't have your people situation in order, competence wise, moral, objectives, everything like that, teams, functioning teams, then don't do anything else. So everything, I think most managers are aware of this, but if they aren't, they should be aware of that. You have complicated things you have to solve, and you have complex things you have to solve. And these are two very different things. And to understand when you're dealing with something complex or complicated, should shift your approach. So in the organization, our systems, integrations, is that complex? No, it's absolutely not complex. It's just complicated. So that means that if you do a particular thing, you can expect a particular outcome, right?
Yeah.
So is a bee swarm complicated? No, it's complex, right?
Yeah.
Is a person complicated? No, it's complex, right? Is generative AI complicated? No, it's complex. So that's why it's very different. So I think like you need to work very careful with change management and people management in the first, and that should be your starting point when you're trying to figure out how to deliver something. So yeah, because you will have these frameworks in your head from previous successes, forget about them. The reason your model that you're perhaps lecturing about and telling everybody about work because you have Kalle and you have Oscar or Linda.
Yeah.
And these are three very particular individuals in this particular combination that made you build this amazing machine. Without them, anybody you're telling to build the same, it will not give the same impact, right?
Yeah, it's a good point.
So I understand that people first, the technology, we will solve it. That's absolutely several factors easier.
Yeah, good point. Really good point. Well, before I round off here, Florian, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, it's been fun, and we move into super interesting times. That might be a blessing or a curse. Let's find out.
Yeah.
So that's all. That's all I think.
No.
Thank you.
Fantastic. No, thank you. It's been really great to have you hear your perspective on lots of different things, right? Digital leadership, balance between tech and business, why adaptability can be a true competitive edge. So I want to say, big thank you for joining me today. Really insightful.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to Builders wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone who's navigating digital transformation in their own organization. Until next time, keep innovating, keep building. We'll see you soon.